All right, everyone, there's a really funny TechCrunch article, archived link in the description, and essentially the point of the article overall really is towards the end, which is a little bit of a kernel of authoritarianism that they sort of bury in the context of their own article, saying, oh, increasingly people are worried about the prevalence of extremist content, and they think YouTube is being too permissive. It's not cracking down enough on bigots, on sexists and racists, on people who are like, they've got extreme fringe views. Like, YouTube wasn't built by people with extreme and fringe views in many cases. The weird side of YouTube really dragged YouTube upward. The offensive side, the violent side, the drug-using side. Look, do you honestly think, I'm framing this in the context of YouTube sort of becoming big around 2007 for the first time. Sure, it was there before, but it really starts to skyrocket around the time, I believe, in that particular year, Google Video meshes with it. YouTube no longer has a mainline competitor. It sort of fires its way past Dailymotion, and the rest is history. Some of these other competing sites that existed, they're basically ghost towns in some cases. YouTube, at the time, existed in a world where lesbians kissing was considered socially unacceptable. Where weed was still largely seen as the devil's weed. You know, maybe for medicinal purposes, but no, if little Jimmy, if I caught him smoking weed, I'd beat his ass, basically. That's sort of the world, the right-wing, abusive, moralistic world is where YouTube emerges from. Over the subsequent years, YouTube is on the forefront as a human communications platform in ending some of the draconian bullshit that was going on at the time. Now on YouTube, nobody really cares if you smoke a joint. They're not going to get banned for it. It might get put to 18 plus. It's about all that it is. Literally speaking, they no longer even remove people from YouTube for actual illegal drug use simply because, well, you know, they claim they're in a state where it's legal. How can YouTube know where they are? You know, we totally don't know where they're uploading from. We've no clue. You know, it's perfectly fine with us. You know, this person's growing a pot plant. Okay, that's just fine. And they don't care if lesbians are kissing on the platform. Again, 18 plus at most. They don't care if you swear. You know, they cared more early on. Like, I wouldn't be able to say fuck as often as I do on 2007 YouTube, potentially. Despite the fact that Tourette's guy was there. Of course, it was, I believe, at the time, routinely rated. People were re-uploading the most offensive, the Charlie Brown clips there that I've shared out. Look up Charlie Brown. It's Martin Luther King Day. If you want the sort of stuff that was uploaded in early YouTube, by the way, the offensive side in the sense of gender, race, things like that, even homophobia, those things were more acceptable then. Now all of a sudden they're problematic. What I say is this. Big tech firms in the realm of human communication are places for human expression and shouldn't be censored on these tokens at all. That includes marginally illegal behavior like smoking weed. Who cares if somebody's showing themselves smoking a doobie? YouTube was built by this weird stuff. TechCrunch is making it seem as though the main problem with the platform is that YouTube is too permissive. They're allowing stuff on there that's fanatic. Did anybody at TechCrunch even bother to investigate, or are they taking the Wall Street Journal's word for it when the Wall Street Journal says, well, YouTube's overrun by extreme people? Did the Wall Street Journal investigate, or did they take the New York Times word for it? Did the New York Times investigate, or did they take the word of somebody else? It's one of those lost in translation things where the original so-called problem, which really it dates back to the PewDiePie hit piece of Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal says, hey, PewDiePie is he's dog whistling to Nazis. The establishment was suffering a systemic mental breakdown because they lost an election to a person that they had labeled a racist. They had labeled him a racist, a sexist, a homophobic bigot. They lost to him. They thought this is the end. So all social progress now is out the window. Now, none of that was ever true. They just worked themselves up into a froth. They then needed new targets. They began targeting entertainers. You have JonTron getting written up with these tech sites. You have PewDiePie. You have all these other people. And they said InfoWars is really extreme and out there. None of these people ever had a problem with the weird conspiratorial side of YouTube, with edgy humor, with dog whistling, with satire, or any of these things prior to the election. They had no problem with it. It's been there for years. It was more prevalent in the past. The fact that YouTube permitted that material to be on YouTube allowed other people to debate them on these topics, driving them under. Good opinions tend to win out over bad ones. People who are bitter and despicable and filled with hatred generally are rejected. The only sort of ethno-nationalistic arguments that ever prevailed were the positive ones. Oh yeah, I find it fine that I'm a white, but I don't feel guilty for being white or something like that. Those prevailed, but people who said, ah ha ha, I hate this minority for being a minority, they get drowned out. They get drowned out specifically because there is conversation going on. Now, we've got TechCrunch and these other sites saying, well, YouTube needs to crack down more. No, that's the problem of the website. The problem is that YouTube is not capable of doing that. Let me tell you, it's impossible to crack down on offensive content for several very important reasons. One, we've already seen on YouTube before. Number one, what is considered offensive will change over time. What you are offended by now, if you're pretending a virtue-signaling moralist pearl clutcher, will be totally different. 10 years from now, they'll still be offended, but they'll be offended about different things. They were very offended by lesbianism on YouTube in 2007. They were very offended by people saying, hey, we should legalize drugs. Oh my goodness, you realize what would happen? They were very offended by the concept that gay people should be treated with equality, should be able to get married. Oh, no, civil unions only, they shouted at the time largely. I combated them myself. Now they're offended by someone saying, yeah, I believe in chromosomes. I believe in race. Now they're offended by that. 10 years from now, they'll be offended by something different, but they're still going to be the same pearl clutchers. They're still going to be the same gossipy old church people that sit around, rambling about other people, pretending to be outraged, don't even care. And they're whipped up into a frenzy constantly by people within the lamestream media. Why do you think, for instance, just putting this out there, why do you think Jared Holt works for Right Wing Watch? Because the other idiots at Right Wing Watch probably don't know anything about tech culture. They needed to hire someone who was younger and more hip to tell them what to believe in. The problem being then that person has inordinate amounts of leverage in saying, oh, well, I find this to be extremist, that's extremist, this is extremism, he's a bigot, this person's a Nazi, black supremacists, skinheads, all sorts of, they see extremists where there's no actual extremism. What you see as extremism is only in the context of what the culture considers within the establishment at the time. That establishment has morphed form significantly in the last 10 years. It's not even just due to Trump, it was already changing. Trump is just the nightcap to the paradigm shift, but that drove them into a frenzy. Now, the problem on YouTube is that if you attempt to implement censorship at the degree that these tech sites and these news corporations, which want to see YouTube destroyed, by the way, because it's less competition for them if people like myself aren't around or have to build up a different platform, means less competition for them. By the way, all these alt-tech sites, ban these corporate groups from ever establishing a presence on your sites. Shut them out entirely. Don't allow them to have personal pages. Don't allow their pundits to have personal pages. Don't allow politicians to have personal pages. Kick them off. Even alternative politicians. Keep all political and news-related content strictly decentralized and civilian if you value your long-term existence. Keep them off. Let them go suck up to CNN. See what happens. See how long they remain relevant. If you want to kill off the establishment entirely, ban them from alt-tech. It'll be hilarious. No, the problem is, if you attempt to implement that level of censorship, if you're relying on algorithms, it's going to sweep up a whole lot of people who are refuting what you consider offensive content. You're going to have to constantly tweak it for what people do find offensive. You're going to alienate large numbers of people on the platform every time you ever kick somebody off who has a large audience. It doesn't matter what their political affiliation is. They can talk about anything. They can be a makeup channel. And they say the wrong thing. They pull a Eugenia Cooney like that time where she was in the chair. That very unfortunate event, and get flagged off for it because it's really offensive because no one ever saw anyone's genitals before. You have all of these problems with the implementation of an automated censorship system. Now let's say you let individuals do it. Well, as we've already seen, YouTube owning up to this in the last few days is saying, oh, this wasn't an algorithmic problem, the YouTube purge. A bunch of channels accidentally got strikes or they got banned or whatever. It was the staff. The new staff didn't quite know enough. They're trained, but they're still new on the job. It's going to be a little messy for a while. Bear with us. They made some mistakes. Okay, a lot of them, like thousands of mistakes involving thousands of people whose actual livelihood in some cases comes in part from having a presence on YouTube. It is a massive human communications platform. It's like my main income comes from books, but I'm not going to sit here and joke around and lie and say, well, the fact that I can talk about my books to thousands of people on YouTube sure doesn't have any impact on, my leverage as an author. No, I think if I didn't put that on YouTube, I'd probably have a few less sales. It might not be the majority of it, but generally, yeah, absolutely. Some people are buying it because they see a YouTube video. Well, it's fucking self-explanatory. So yeah, even if there are individuals, whether they're paired with the algorithms or whether it's just a manual looking at videos, it's going to be a problem because there will be discretion. And YouTube has enshrined this now. With limited state, they have enshrined the concept of discretion to the point where if you are technically just a little in breach of TOS or just a little shy of it, you might get put in this sandbox mode where they're saying you've been naughty, but not naughty enough to actually break our site rules. What you call discretion, I call vagary. It is unhealthy for a platform. Be specific about what the rules are in the first place. I can look at YouTube and see people smoking weed all across the platform. This technically is a flaggable offense against the terms of service, but it's not enforced. Discretion is being used. Now, I don't have a problem with leaning towards the libertarian side on that issue. Why is it that all these other issues you don't? I don't see a lot of pot smokers getting put into limited state. No, if I look at a list of limited state videos, what I see are old 30s and 40s classical music and tuba bands from 20s Bavaria and people rambling about Israel a few times. That's what I see. Most of it's not hate-filled content. It's like historical music. About 2/3 of it. It's insane. So I don't understand how this can be justified. TechCrunch coming out saying, well, there's a problem. They're too permissive. They're not too permissive. They're too draconian. What they should be doing is censoring less. Instead of trying to switch from enforcing one bad rule to enforcing another, why don't they just not have bad rules? No, drug use should be allowed on the platform. Now, if the police come calling and say, well, we need this person, they're talking about LSD and they got a pot plant and we want to crack, go ahead and give them the info, but it should still be allowed on the platform. That's the way to use that discernment. Let the local law enforcement get involved. It might be legal in their state and local law enforcement doesn't give a fuck. Yeah, there's a difference between the two. It's just like YouTube does this when it comes to European audiences. Certain European groups can't even access my channel because I'm too edgy for them or something. But US users aren't blocked from it. It's not just a blanket site-wide thing where, oh, this person has been declared an enemy of Merkel, so, people in the UK can't watch the material, can't go to the channel or subscribe. Not that subscriptions at this point or notifications are even working half the time. I mean, yesterday there was a huge glitch involving it. It wasn't just my channel, it was a million channels. It's ridiculous. It's not a lack of censorship, too permissive, too laissez-faire. TechCrunch doesn't know what it's talking about. No, they need to actually... Why is it that people outside of YouTube's sort of tech subculture constantly have such strong opinions on YouTube? We can take care of it. There are hundreds of millions of people on YouTube. Do you honestly think that the number of people that are violent extremist is greater than the number that aren't? Well, then don't worry. We've got substantial... We'll take care of it. But if you try to force those extremist individuals into an echo chamber, you kick them off the site or sandbox and abuse them, they're going to get more extreme. They're also going to gain sympathy from people who simply don't want censorship on the site. There's going to be your big generational problem. That it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Actual hate will end up taking root because of your poor decision-making skills. It'll be the same as cable or radio. Any of these other things. We're taking you off the radio. Well, that person, they're sure not going to get bitter. It's sure going to improve the situation when half their income dries up and they can no longer connect with people who can debate them. Yeah, they're just going to be a skinhead in a trailer with other skinheads talking to other skinheads. They're never going to get challenged on their beliefs. Those black supremacists, they're listening to Louis Farrakhan all day. They're not going to get challenged on their beliefs. They're part of an echo chamber now. They're not able to encounter other people and debate them. That's the problem. That's about all.